But that would be about a scheme. That would be a robust change, not a bringing together of identities of websites.
Yes. Just from a consumer perspective, I think the outline Steve's given is that you know we brought together through the ECA and ESC a large number of contractors, both England and Wales and Scotland. So we cover the UK. And from our research with consumers, which we undertake significant amounts of, we know awareness of Part P is quite low. I think from our last survey it was about 14% of those surveyed, and it's a 2,000 sample survey done by such as research companies such as Ipsos Mori. So it's a robust piece of work, and that awareness is falling, and we need to work, I think, in terms of developing a understanding of how consumers do procure electricians, because we know there are a huge range of directories out there. For example, Checker Trade has just recently announced it's sponsoring Crawley Town Football Club. So yeah, people will use different routes to find a tradesperson, whether it's an electrician or a plasterer, whoever it is. And of course we've got Trustmark, which we're all party to. And so, you know, from our point of view, we want to understand whether or not there is confusion from the consumer about the number of registers out there, or whether it's confusion about how to procure an electrician. But once they understand how to procure an electrician, if they go to electrical safety register, electric safe, or another register that might be out there, or directory, then as long as they're going to a competent person, then that's what the ESC wants to drive them to. Select, the Scottish Trade Association, are very supportive and keen to participate in the electrical safety register activity, because they adhere and follow the same values and work activities that we do. So. I think from the point of view of asking for a bit more time, because there's going to be a natural point where a review is undertaken of Part P, I think in 2015. Our position is, and has always been, and as stated, that ESC would fund and would be delighted if NAPIT would participate in that research to undertake further investigation to establish what the consumer's position is in all of this.
Confused, I would have thought.
As the electric stuff, we're trying to strip back the layers of confusion. You know, we are promoting what's already there. It doesn't need reinventing. We have created that single brand. Phil talks about consumer research, and I don't know if you're aware, but we are undertaking our own consumer research. And I agree with Phil. There's a lack of understanding out there on procurement of electricians. There's an even bigger lack of understanding of competent persons. So I think the fact that there are some brands out there promoting safety and procurement and so on to the customer is a step forward. As I said earlier, we have got 5 of the 6 competent person scheme operators on board. We think that's quite significant. We have invited Searchshore to join us, and now got a decline last week. I'm still adamant that our scheme or our brand is what the CLG Select Committee was asking for, a common brand for electricians, domestic electricians, full scope, competent electricians out there already exists. We've done research, and one of the things that's come out from research is, you know, still it's quite amazing stats. One of the biggest things that people still use their friends and relatives are not necessarily qualified. There's extreme danger out there. But we're trying to put that right. We've undergone significant campaigning with advertising throughout the country to promote the brand and bring that awareness of the dangers of using unsafe people to work on home electrics to roost.
I don't know whether perhaps just one each of you could say, what do you think the differences between the two registers are?
My register, well, say my register, it's actually, it's not NAPIT's register, it's 5 other individual organisations who are supporting it. It promotes the competent, full scope electricians already authorised through the DCLG Competent Person Scheme and registered with the DCLG Competent Person Schemes. My view that the register, Search Your Register, is a scheme to promote their contractors, which includes domestic and commercial. My scheme, the Electrical Safe Scheme, is a domestic scheme only.
Right, okay, that's clear. Do one of the other chaps, lady, would like to say, just in case there's a difference?
The Electrical Safety Register covers 80% of the industry doing 90% of the work, and it covers all of the UK. It does cover commercial and domestic work, but probably the key difference that we think is very, very important, and whatever register is set up and whatever journey we take from here, I think needs to be at the top of our minds, is this point about direct verification. Martin referenced that Electric Safe Directory had taken away a layer. We believe it's added one in. If a consumer complains to us, we are the organisation that has undertaken the assessment of the individual concerned. We can talk to that contractor and we can fix things for that consumer. Electric Safe, in the terms of complaints, simply passes it back to the scheme operator. So the consumer gets bounced from one place to another when it's got an inquiry and is not in a position to do that first-hand verification and checking of the contractor. And I think in terms of a consumer proposition, that's a very, very key and important point.
Okay.
Also, all of the funds from the Electrical Safety Register go up to the charity and the trade association. And the charity does a range of wonderful work in terms of giving grants to old people who need electrical work fixed in their homes. And the trade association works very hard to raise standards in the industry. So, you know, it's that, and that has been the case for a total of 150 years, 50 years on the charity and 100 odd years on the trade association. So that is part of our culture. We do not exist for shareholder gain. We're not confused by that. The people that do the inspections within Search are directly employed by the organisation. And we believe that's why we've got 80% of the market, because the market understands that's what sets us apart.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you very much. What I'm interested now in then is just making sure we've got all the groundwork done here. Are there any technical standards that are difference between the two registers?
I say no. We worked on the CLG authorised competent person scheme. We worked to the AAS committee's recommendations and standards. We work to those standards. They're government standards, government endorsed. So I can't understand why we need to work to it. Some arbitrary standards created by another register.
And you think you create different standards, do you?
Martin's absolutely right. Part P is the baseline that we all operate from and that we're all scheme operators too. We believe our standards are the most robust in the industry and we go out to apply them in that way. But the baseline standard is the same, and that's back to the Part P landscape for the domestic side of things, not the same on commercial.
Okay, so I suppose we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty now. So, Mr. Bruno, why don't you think you can join their scheme?
I would support any scheme that promotes competent persons.
That's a very good answer. Ms. Clancy, why don't you think you can join his scheme?
Because it's not a case of joining the scheme, it would be a case of joining the register, the directory that is Electric Safe, and we don't think this consumer proposition is strong enough within that or moves us forward.
Okay. Final question from me. What changes do you think Mr. Bruno would be helpful from their scheme so that it could be joined with your scheme?
Well, it's not a case of joining. It's that we have a brand fed in by 5 DCLG authorised operators. Their scheme is their own scheme promoting domestic and commercial. We'd join any scheme that would promote domestic electricians and following the same standards throughout. And we'd also believe in one scheme or brand fed in by multiple schemes.
Okay, and not to put words in your mouth then, Ms Clancy, but if your scheme is so good because it deals with the complaints as a one-stop shop, how could you see the other big scheme meshing in with yours?
The electric safe
yeah.
register. Well, I think we're confident in our 80%. So in that sense, that's the biggest scheme that exists. We have offered the opportunity for a discussion with NAPIT, and the electric safe, but it needs to be against the basis of making a contribution to the charity and the trade association, by also Searchable being able to conduct those assessments, so we have that first-hand knowledge of it, and the transparency that you would expect to come on any partnership, as Steve's outlined, which would involve other things as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Mary.
Thank you, Chair. Could you say, is there any reason why this committee shouldn't produce a report concluding that the government should use its powers to bring in a mandatory scheme, just like gas safe?
Well, may I start? Just from a consumer perspective, and if I step back a couple of years back in 2010, the Electrical Safety Council did endeavour to work with all of the scheme operators at that time to provide a portal that would allow a consumer in a friendly facing way to look at all of the contracts on the competent person's website. It was apparent that not all the scheme operators were keen to support that, and even though we were going to fund an online campaign to promote that to the consumer, we had to withdraw our offer because the legal liabilities that were being placed upon us, should we agree to the contract that was being put forward, would have meant that we couldn't have met our liabilities. It would have been too onerous for a charity to undertake. So that was why we embarked upon the journey that we've been on in terms of setting up the Electrical Safety Register in partnership with the Electrical Contractors Association. And being a trustee of the Gas Safe Register, I can also speak in terms of the benefits of a mandatory scheme. And from a personal perspective and experience out there in the industry, I don't actually think that there's a need to move into the mandatory requirements, because I think the current Part P scheme works quite well. We worked hard as ESC to make sure that we retained it, although it has been, I think, the changes have yet to filter through to see what impact the changes that were made earlier this year will have impact on us. And that's why we've said all along, and when we wrote to you recently, we said, look, there are a number of things that we need to establish and move forward on to provide you as a committee with evidence to make a final decision as to whether you would recommend going towards a mandatory scheme or looking at living with either 2 major brands out there that promote to the consumer, or in some way bringing those together on a voluntary basis. But I think as a consumer proposition, we have about the right shape for making sure consumers get the electrician they need that's competent and qualified. I don't think it's necessary to push the industry into a mandatory scheme, because that will add costs and change requirements for electricians, and particularly in these tough times, I think that would be a big ask for them. And I don't think it would benefit the consumer either, personally, from a safety point of view.
Can I just say that my fellow colleagues here have worked in the electrical safety industry for 150 years, yet here we are today discussing a recognisable brand to consumers. Sorry, but what have you been doing for 150 years? Now, I'm not keen on a gas safe type of register. I'm keen on a brand fed in by DCLG authorised competent person scheme operators. And I think that brand would be supported by my colleagues on electrical safety. That's 5 out of the 6 or 7 if you include Vesca. And we would support that scheme based on EAS compliance, the specifications laid out there. We're all, I think, there's about 5 of the 6 are actually UCAS accredited now, as required by DCLG. By June next year, all scheme operators have to be UCAS accredited. As far as I'm aware, 2 of our organisations are going through that process now. So by June 2014, we should all be UCAS accredited as per the DCLG requirements. Going back to what Phil said about the Electrical Safety Council offering of promoting the competent person schemes 2 years ago, that was in the that wasn't offered, and I can't. But the problem there was possibly liability, as Phil suggested, but the Electrical Safety Council wanted to own the data, from what I understand, and the scheme operators were not happy with the council owning that data.
Make that clear that the Electrical Safety Council didn't want to own the data. One of the concerns I also have as the consumer charity is that some of the scheme operators currently on the Electric Safe Register aren't UCAS accredited. And that's one of the requirements we as ESC and ECA have always stipulated for those that wish to join our register. And in terms of size, you know, Emma's mentioned the 80%, which is 34,000 contractors in England and Wales, whereas the 6 other scheme operators equate to about 260 electrical contractors. So from a consumer perspective, I'm looking to try and provide consumers with the biggest opportunity to find an electrician. And I think we do that quite well through the Electrical Safety Register.
Can I add to that?
Do you want to come back on that before?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Electrical Safety Council, they're not scheme operators. They do have an agenda to promote electrical safety to the consumer and also faulty products, and that's quite commendable. But they're not scheme operators. The scheme operators here are Electric Safe and its 5 representatives in Searchall. The Select Committee recommendations was talking about the competent person scheme as it exists now. All we're doing is providing a brand at our cost at the moment, so supporting those schemes. Can I just tell you, they might have 80% of the industry, but they haven't got 100%. Our website promotes 100% of all domestic competent persons, electricians. And for your information, we have over 600 Searchall members have applied to our register. So people are coming to our register, but we need to check them and verify them independently, whereas the other 5 operators do let us have the data freely to promote on the website.
Perhaps to answer Mary's question, I think it would be regrettable at this point to take that step, having gone through that consultation process and listened to all the stakeholders, including industry, when we believe that we can make significant steps even further to strengthen from where we are at the moment within the time frame given. But I think if the committee does decide to take that decision and make that recommendation, I think all we could do would be to urge that it needs to be so much more than a brand. It has to have that first party, that first touch verification of someone's skills and competence, and have built within it that strong consumer protection that is much more than the debate that seems to be emerging today.
Right. Thank you. This committee has gone on quite a long and steep learning curve on electrical safety, as you can imagine, and it's quite clear that there's been there's public ignorance of the position of responsibilities and also Part P scheme, the various different aspects that you all have to adhere to. I think it's fair to say that the public in general is not completely ignorant, but is probably not as well informed as it should be. And if I was a consumer sitting at home listening to the 4 of you with respect, I would be completely confused now as to what I should do to make sure that my electrical wiring and other goods and services are safe and secure. What message do you think your evidence today to us has given to those consumers? I don't mind who answers first.
As part of our DCLG authorisation, and we talk about, Sam talked and Phil talked about the charity, we are whatever we earn from the Part P schemes, earnings have to be ring-fenced. And any surpluses that we make go towards promotion of the schemes. In 2010, I believe, part of the authorisation, DCOG authorisation was to use those surpluses to promote the schemes. Electric Safe Register is doing just that. We're using our surpluses to promote those schemes. We're promoting it on behalf of 5 schemes. We've undertaken a marketing campaign through the London Underground, roadside campaigns, we're doing surveys, and so on. And we feel as though we're trying to get, we feel we're being quite successful in reaching a large audience out there to point them towards the direction of the Electric Safe Register website and search facility. Yes, if I was a consumer, I'd think, well, where do I go to find an electrician? Do I ask my mate next door? Do I ask my family friend? Or do I go to one of these unregulated sites, which is seem to have more budget to promote? I'm not keen on unregulated sites. We do believe in safety aspects, and our members are very safely conscious-minded, they're qualified, they go through assessment processes, just like the Electrical Safety Register. We all follow the same process.
Okay. Emma, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just to highlight, our sort of experience has been that actually the best way to promote to consumers is to take a different approach rather than kind of tube ads, etc. And what we've undertaken is a campaign to reach those that actually kind of procure electrical work in places like housing associations. And we've recently run a very big campaign to promote the Electrical Safety Register in that way. So obviously, therefore, we're reaching the people that need the protection the most, and we're reaching a lot of people at the same time as part of our campaigns. But we've always spent significant
So sorry, the protection there would be for the housing association and their management. What about the people that live in the property?
No, it would be
what about
for
the individual consumer
who's
thinking, who do I go to get my electrical work done?
Well, sorry, go on, Bill.
Sorry, Amy, finish your answer and then I'll come to
but there's always been, NIC has historically been the strongest brand in the electrical industry because of the history, and there's 64% consumer recognition for that brand. When the Part P came in, there was obviously a competitive marketplace opened up, and there are therefore multiple brands that exist within that. So, you know, we've always had a history of promoting that, but one of the main things that our family does is give money to the charity. Can I just cut across you for a moment? Because there's a lot of debate and discussion in the evidence you're giving to us, on all across it, on brands. Yeah. Now, brand to me is a marketing tool to encourage people to buy your services. There's a much difference between that and, say, a kite mark, i.e. a standard to which the work is done, rather than a brand which encourages me to use that particular company or particular service. But actually what I want as a consumer is to know whoever I choose is actually the same, at least a minimum standard, if not, you know, the ideal standard that everyone wants to see. So I hope that you will go away from here thinking, actually maybe we should change our rhetoric here on brand as opposed to standard. I completely agree, and that's why the Electrical Safety Register is more than a brand, it's more than a directory. It has that consumer protection built in for all the reasons that we've already explained, so I completely agree with you. And that's also why the charity has worked very hard to promote electrical safety issues, irrespective, just people's responsibilities in terms of their home and the risks that they face. And, you know, doing that with a charity funded by the Electrical Safety Register is something I believe that consumers respond very positively to.
Philip, you wanted to?
Thank you, yes. I think it's terrific that people here are seeking to promote electrical safety, because every message out there to the consumer can only help, because we know awareness levels are low, particularly around Part P. ESC has worked hard to raise awareness with consumers. We continue to do so. And in terms of talking about budgets that have been expended, this year we spent £980,000 on general awareness of electrical safety. Last year was just over 1.1 million to address low awareness issues. And we're gradually turning people's behaviour around, and this isn't an overnight quick slick marketing campaign that you might see on the TV where people will go out and buy a widget because they think it looks brilliant and sexy. This is about behaviour change, because people do not understand the issues and the consequences around poor electrics. And so when we talk about brand, we're talking about an ethos, a set of values, and how we expect our contractors to behave with their customers, and equally how we, assessment team, behave with our electricians to make sure that they get the right safety messages. And the electrical industry is a great intermediate stakeholder for the Electrical Safety Council, because we give them the tools to go out and talk to the customer. So where a customer doesn't want an RCD because they think the electrician's just trying to make a few more bob, with a little bit of help with some appropriate literature, the customer understands why they should have the RCD fitted. And so I don't think it's a question of whether it's electric safe or electrical safety register. It's about the right language, the dialogue with the consumer, which we have a lot of, to get over to them the need to think about procuring a competent electrician. And we did a campaign in June which reached 127 million people. Now I know there's not 127 million people in the UK, but it depends on the media channels they look at or listen to. So there are a number of opportunities for each media channel that people may hear. And so from the feedback we've got and the analytics, it's about 127 million people. So we are getting out into the community, and we are talking to a lot of vulnerable people, because we use radio quite a lot as an effective means of communication with the general public.
Okay, I'm moving on. I mean, if I was a newly qualified electrician, I've done all my tests, and do I have to get on 2 registers, 1 register? What do I do? If I'm now setting up as a one-man business, just me by myself, 2 registers, 1 register, what do I do?
You have a choice of a number of scheme operators.
But what does that say then to the consumer about me as an electrician?
What does it say? Well, the consumer should be educated in finding someone competent, and I think the point Phil is making...
Wait a minute, the consumer is consuming services. It's the individual that marketing to that consumer who's got the responsibility to say, I'm safe, I'm secure, you can rely on my work. Not the other way round, surely.
That's right. No, and there is an obligation under the Part P rules for scheme operators to do so. What, believe it or not, where we're at actually is an improvement post the review, because the 7 or 8 scheme operators have actually come together. You now have 2 registers, whereas before there were 8 separate ones. But fundamentally, there's a lot of work to be done before we get even to dealing with these 2 registers about the fundamental message to a consumer about actually using someone competent in the first place. Where we're at, our research would suggest that 10% or less of consumers will find an electrician through an online data source. Ours are 2. If you were to search on the web, as I'm sure some of you will have done, just to see how big an issue this is, you'll find not only ours that sound similar, but a multitude of others, primarily private companies, that will sound similar. Not to mention, of course, Checker Trade, Rated People, all of those various. What we're saying is we've done some work to bring the 8 down to 2. We now need to do some work to work with the consumers to get the message over about using someone competent in the first place. The competent person scheme is something we can do in the meantime, which was our recommendation to Council. And our suggestion is you've already put a line in the sand, and in 2 years' time you'd want to take a decision on whether a single scheme, and I mean scheme, not round, is the way forward. And I would suggest that was a very wise thing to do, and we can help with the information to make that decision. If you do a single scheme, as my colleague Emma has said, that really does need to be a scheme, not a directory that pulls schemes together, because that is a recipe for disaster that will fall apart at its first test. What you would want is something robust, single standard, single assessment, single complaint process. And I would remind you that there is already a scheme that has 80% of the people on there and 90% of the work covered.
Okay. Yeah, we've heard that several times. Martin, you wanted to come back, I think.
Oh, I don't really think you've answered your question, has it?
No.
DCLG have authorised, and we can count, they talk about 7 or 8, I think there's 6 DCLG schemes offering full scope electricians to the consumer out there. All electricians are assessed under DCLG approved schemes. These are government schemes that are being assessed to. Nobody else's, and that's what electric safe operators do. If you were an electrician, newly qualified, wanting to join a scheme, there is choice in the market there for you to join. You would look at price, you would look at standards, you look at the benefits, you'd look at promotion, because I'm going to pay you a lot of money and I want work out of it. That's what an electrician will probably think. But electricians also have high values in terms of electrical safety. And, you know, all you have to do is read the forums and listen to people. They expect a high standard of work or installation. And we feel that there's still several guys out there, and persons who are not registered, not qualified, doing dangerous work. And I think so if I was an electrician, I'd be looking and asking all those questions. But as I said, DCLG authorised schemes are authorised by DCLG, government schemes. We're not reinventing anything. We are just feeding them all into one brand.
Okay, I mean, we're clearly almost certainly going to get the Minister back to give his view on how things go. I personally thought that getting the Israelis and Palestinians to sit down to talk together was quite a difficult thing to do. It seems that the electrical industry is even more difficult. Why shouldn't he just say, OK, I've had enough of this. You can't agree amongst yourselves. I'm going to make a decision and there will be a single regulatory body and I'm going to set it up and actually all of you will be enmeshed in this and you can contribute to it, but there will be a single body. What's to stop him doing that?
So what was your last bit? Sorry,
What's to stop him making that announcement and actually saying, whether it's 1 or 2 years of time or whatever, actually implementing that?
Would he really want to go through?
No, I'm asking, what is to stop him? Why shouldn't he do that?
Sorry.
No, go on.
One of you, I don't mind. Emma, go on, you go
I'll
first.
start. Well, there clearly is nothing to stop him doing that. And I think when Part P was reviewed, not very long ago, a whole range of opinions were taken into account and that option was considered. Yep. And at that time, I think, in a nutshell, it was looked at, compared obviously to gas safe, and there was a expectation, subject to review later on, that actually to take that step would increase bureaucracy and potentially costs for small businesses, but most importantly, without benefit in terms of health and safety. And I don't think that's changed. So I guess that would be something, that the Minister would look at again.
Okay, thank you. Philip, you?
Well, I just wanted to say that the Minister could go down that route, and I think for the reasons just outlined, it would be something that I wouldn't like to see happen at this point in time. But there are consumer marketing benefits to the way that the current framework is structured, because whilst we compete, because that's the framework, we do market to the consumer, and the messages are very common.
So what advantage to the consumer?
Yeah.
What advantage to the consumer from the having two schemes?
Well, it's not two schemes; it's the one scheme, but it's the two registers. It's part of the scheme.
So what advantages are in that to the consumer?
Because
so Mr. and Mrs. X sitting at home wanted to know who to employ.
Because the competitive landscape creates a situation...
So, what competition for the consumer?
Not for the... because there's multiple scheme operators, SearchShaw's consumer proposition has to be stronger, because otherwise electrical contractors won't register with me. So that creates an environment where we both want to anyway, because of the nature of the organisation, but that factor of choice means that we're constantly looking to drive up our standards and give a better proposition. Contractors won't register from us if consumers don't choose us. So in order for consumers to choose us...
If you make it more difficult for them to register, in other words, for your standards to go up, they might go somewhere else.
Sorry, I'm not...
That's the electrician's choice.
Yeah.
But
it's not competition for the consumer, is it, out there, wanting to employ someone? It's nothing to do with that at all, is it? It's no benefit to them at all.
I disagree. I think the consumer has a freedom of choice, and it's up to us to educate the consumer so they understand how to go about procuring an electrician. So they don't go to these directories that sit out there unregulated, that there are plenty of.
And the same situation exists in glazing and the other competent person schemes. So I guess that would also need to be looked at.
It's also about liability for complaints, Chair.
With due respect, Emma, you say there's a difference. Well, the worst case scenario of glazing is it might fall out. The worst case scenario of electrical things will cause a fire, cause death,
Absolutely.
And destruction. I mean, so we are talking about different elements here.
Absolutely.
So it's a fundamental safety issue, which I'm concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And both organisations do promote the safety issue. If you look at our website, we promote safety. We also try to put in plain English what consumers would expect to see from an electrician.
I think we're all struggling with. The key issue is, why can't you just bury your differences, come up with a single register which has the same terms and conditions, or whatever it is, exactly the same terms and conditions, and then everyone will be happy. Because then it's a case of everyone knows whichever registered individual on that register is chosen, they will be adhering to the common standards and actually I can be safe. If someone's not on that register, you're taking a risk. And they may be competent people, but it's going to be a risk. So what's stopping you?
Mr. Black, we've done that. We followed your...
You haven't. You've got 2 separate registers, which you published almost days apart.
We've produced a register or a brand, whatever you want to call it, with...
No, you're calling it a brand, and that to me, a brand is marketing to individuals or companies.
Well.
And I don't have a problem with you marketing. I think that's absolutely right. What I'm talking about is a register that says, if someone's on this register, I am going to get safe, secure work that I can rely upon. The people doing it are at a required standard. If they fail to do the work properly, they'll be struck off and they won't be allowed to practice anymore. Equally, their work is inspected on occasional terms to make sure that they are competent. All those sorts of things I expect to see from register. But I don't see why it's so complicated that you can only have you can't have more than. Well, sorry, you can't have one register to do it.
Yeah. And then you can have the common brand, which the public then can recognise, gives them more value.
Well, Chair, the original intent through the letters that we wrote to you jointly was that we would develop that common mark through the competent persons for activity.
It's not just the brand sits on top of the common arrangement.
No, that would be the common mark, and then the various schemes would have their own logos, because if an electrician's with NAPIT, they would want to show their NAPIT logo.
Well, I think we're probably getting to the end of this conversation. All I'd say, the only thing I've heard you agree about this afternoon is that you don't want a mandatory scheme. So one thing you've got common agreement between you. You've disagreed about each of the schemes, you've said what's wrong with them, you said why your scheme is right, why you can't come together. All you don't want the government to do is to act to bring a mandatory scheme in. I'm just thinking that perhaps a threat of a mandatory scheme from the government is about the only thing that would get you all together. Okay? Shall we leave it there? Okay, we'll have a minute's room talking. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Order. This brings us to the end of our public proceedings.